In the candle-lit chambers of marble palaces, beneath the gilded ceilings of Athens and Macedon, shadows whispered of secrets never carved into stone. Ancient Greek rulers, celebrated in history as warriors, philosophers, and architects of civilization, were also men of flesh, driven by appetites they could never fully confess. Behind their public image of glory and wisdom, some harbored desires so unsettling, so transgressive, that they blurred the line between love, power, and obsession. Tonight, we pull aside the veil draped over statues and myths. What happens when the men who commanded armies and shaped empires surrendered themselves to forbidden hungers? What did desire look like in the private lives of those who claimed divine blood? And how did their hidden passions shape the fate of nations? This is not the Greece of polished marble. This is Greece in shadows, where lust became law, and the forbidden was carved into the soul of power. To understand these rulers' hidden appetites, we must first step into the world of ancient Greece, a society that at once celebrated sensuality and yet feared its excess. The Greeks did not see desire in the same way as modern societies. To them, eros was both sacred and dangerous, a divine madness bestowed by gods like Aphrodite and Eros. Love between men was not taboo in itself. Indeed, pederastic relationships between older mentors and younger youths were often woven into education, philosophy, and even military life. Yet even within this cultural acceptance, boundaries existed, boundaries that, when crossed, spiraled into corruption, cruelty, and obsession. For rulers, who wielded near-absolute power, these boundaries mattered little. Kings, tyrants, and generals could indulge in what others dared not imagine. Their passions, magnified by authority, became tools of domination. Desire was never simply personal. It was political, ritualistic, even weaponized. And so, history leaves us tales of rulers whose longings unsettled even their contemporaries, stories of men who turned intimacy into theater and appetite into tyranny. Few names in Greek history shine brighter than Alexander the Great, the conqueror who carved an empire from Greece to India. Yet behind the brilliance of his campaigns, whispers followed him of a hunger more personal. Alexander's bond with his companion Hephaestion transcended mere friendship. Ancient writers describe their connection as mirroring that of Achilles and Patroclus, an archetype of passionate devotion. Some chroniclers hinted that Alexander's grief at Hephaestion's death was not merely of a comrade lost, but of a lover torn away. He demanded divine honors for him, staged ceremonies rivaling those for kings, and even ordered entire cities to mourn. But Alexander's desires did not stop there. Accounts suggest he took both men and women into his orbit, but always on his terms, always as extensions of his dominance. In some stories, captured princes and daughters of conquered rulers were offered not just as spoils of war, but as objects for his consuming appetites. His love was intertwined with conquest. Eros became another battlefield. In Sparta, a land where discipline was prized above all, desire became a spark for treachery. Pausanias, regent of Sparta after the Persian Wars, found himself entangled in a scandal of forbidden lust. He became the object of ridicule by a younger male lover, mocked and spurned in ways that humiliated him deeply. In Spartan society, where reputation meant survival, such shame was unbearable. But Pausanias' response was not withdrawal. It was obsession. Consumed by wounded pride, he turned his longing into vengeance, plotting betrayals that eventually branded him a traitor. Here, desire was not tender, but corrosive. The forbidden was not the relationship itself, but the way it twisted into violence and political ruin. The Spartan general who had once saved Greece at Plataea was destroyed not by the Persians, but by his own heart's humiliation. Few figures embodied dangerous charisma like Alcibiades, the golden boy of Athens. Student of Socrates, brilliant general, and relentless schemer, he was as famous for his seductions as for his strategies. Alcibiades turned desire into a form of power. Ancient writers accused him of countless affairs, with men and women alike, including the wives of his allies. To sleep with Alcibiades was to be pulled into his orbit. To resist him was to risk his scorn. His enemies painted him as a man whose beauty and charm were masks for corruption. His greatest scandal, however, was not just of flesh, but of faith. On the eve of Athens' Sicilian expedition, Sacred statues of Hermes were found mutilated across the city. Whispers accused Alcibiades of leading drunken orgies that mocked the gods themselves. To Athenians, this was more than impiety. It was sexual desecration tied to political betrayal. His appetites became proof, to many, that he was unfit to hold power. Beyond mainland Greece, the tyrants of Sicily and southern Italy carved out kingdoms of indulgence. These rulers, unrestrained by democratic scrutiny, often used desire as spectacle. Dionysius of Syracuse was notorious for surrounding himself with youths and courtesans, hosting feasts where intimacy and humiliation blurred. His court became a stage where captives were forced into roles that entertained their masters' appetites. Stories speak of games where desire was twisted into punishment, where those who refused him were mocked, exiled, or destroyed. Here, Eros was no longer personal. It was tyranny embodied. The ruler's forbidden cravings became law, and subjects became unwilling actors in his theater of power. In Egypt, where Greek dynasties ruled after Alexander's death, Ptolemy IV Philopator gained infamy not for conquest, but for indulgence. Ancient chroniclers accused him of drowning in wine, drugs, and lust. He married his own sister, a shocking act to the Greek world but cloaked in the Egyptian custom of divine unions. Behind the ritual, however, lay an obsession with control. Ptolemy's desire was not only for bodies but for legitimacy. His reign was marked by cruelty that blurred with appetite. Accused of surrounding himself with cults of pleasure, he allowed governance to rot while his court whispered of excess. His forbidden desires weren't whispered secrets. They were paraded as spectacle until the kingdom itself weakened under their weight. Before Alexander the Great, his father Philip II forged the Macedonian Empire through cunning politics and ruthless wars. Yet Philip's desires were as notorious as his campaigns. He married at least 7 women, many for political gain, but his appetite stretched far beyond alliances. Philip was accused of taking lovers among both men and women, weaving his private affairs into the fabric of his rule. Rivals whispered that his bedroom was as busy as his battlefield. Some claimed his reckless appetites fueled feuds within his court, planting seeds of betrayal that would later bloom in his assassination. Here, desire was not just indulgence but strategy, a ruler using passion as weapon, unaware it might sharpen the knife against his own throat. Demetrius, son of Antigonus, earned the title Poliorcetes, the besieger of cities. Yet his greatest conquests were not always military. Ancient sources describe him as devastatingly handsome, irresistible to men and women alike. Wherever he went, his presence disrupted courts and households. He treated desire as another form of siege, relentless, consuming, inescapable. His lovers included queens, priestesses, and even wives of allies, sparking scandals across Greece. In Athens, statues were raised to him not only as a general, but as a god of Eros itself. But with each indulgence, resentment grew. To some, Demetrius embodied the terrifying truth that beauty and power, when fused with desire, could enslave nations as surely as armies. 7 rulers, 7 forbidden desires. What unites them is not merely lust, but the way desire became entangled with power. Alexander turned grief into divine ritual. Pausanias let humiliation corrode his honor. Alcibiades wielded seduction as politics. Dionysius of Syracuse made pleasure into tyranny. Ptolemy cloaked incest in divine right. Philip II fused appetite with diplomacy and paid the price. Demetrius turned beauty itself into a weapon of rule. For these rulers, desire was never private. It became myth, scandal, betrayal, ritual. In their hands, Eros was both crown and curse. The Greeks saw love as divine madness, but here madness was magnified by thrones. These stories survive not because of prurience alone, but because they reveal how fragile the line is between intimacy and empire, passion and ruin. When we remember Greece, we often recall marble temples and golden philosophies, but behind those ideals were rulers who bore their own shadows, men whose forbidden desires reshaped history as surely as their armies did. Their lusts remind us of a truth that lingers even now. Power magnifies hunger, and hunger, left unchecked, can topple empires. Some histories are remembered, but others are abandoned.